Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here from the KnifeCenter, and this
is Seth V.
And today we're talking about what makes a knife collectible. All right, so today's episode is inspired by a comment on our FAQ series from this weekend from Michael Bloomston. And rather than focus on it on an FAQ, we figured we'd give it its own show, so to speak.
Yeah, interesting topic.
Michael Bloomston says, can you discuss knife collecting from the aspect of how to determine which knives are considered more collectible? Custom, sprint run, manufacturer or dealer exclusives or production. Goes on, and also which 10 knives should be included in any respectable collection. I don't intend to buy sell knives, but would like to build an interesting collection over the years. Thanks. Well, it's a good one. It's a fun one to think about, at least.
Yeah, for a couple of collectors like ourselves.
Indeed. Seth and I have bought a few knives between us in our days here. You can kind of look at this in two ways, and your question, I think, is kind of asking questions on both sides of it. One, like which 10 knives should be included in any respectable collection. We've kind of done that video on 10 knives everyone should own. We'll leave a link to that. But that's something that like you should have for the sake of having to get a full experience of something, which is different from like collecting something for the joy of curating a collection in a way, I would say.
Yeah, those are different. Collecting is a very strange and personal topic because it can be anything. I mean, people collect postage stamps, they collect...
Some people collect their old fingernails. That's very personal.
Very personal. So, but that is that's sort of one extreme of it. But a collection doesn't have to make sense necessarily.
Right. Which Seth and I have talked about like some elements that we think make or contribute to making a knife collectible. But ultimately, you can strip all of it away to personal preference. Do you like it? That's all the justification you need. If it makes you happy to have certain amounts of a thing, it doesn't have to be anything else to be worth it. But what are those elements we've talked about? We think quality, and that's a sliding scale, like a certain amount of quality.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to us to have a bunch of stuff that's no good.
$5 gas station knives, there's no reason to collect those. Although there could be some angle you could find to make them interesting, but a certain amount of quality, a variety within said item, some kind of story, whether it's of modern significance or there's some history behind the knife, and then to a certain degree rarity as well should play into it. And that leads us to the first thing I wanted to talk about, which is something that's not currently rare really, but it's got some quality, it's got plenty of variety, and it's got some story, and I think a place in history in the making, and that would be something like the Civivi Elementum series. Tons of variety. Here's our KnifeCenter exclusive version with a button lock. They've done stuff like fixed blades, new utility blade versions. There's so many different things in the Elementum family out there you could collect, so it's got all of those things going for it. But not rarity currently.
Yeah. The thing with rarity is sometimes you can see rarity in the moment when a limited production comes through, and sometimes they'll even say this is just 50 or 100 knives or 500 knives. You know very specifically how common or rare something is. But looking back at the history of collecting, things that are rare now are often things that were commonplace in the past and got used up.
Yeah. Inexpensive stuff, not to use the word cheap, but cheap stuff gets used and it sometimes gets used up. There's, not a lot of people would take a $50 folding knife and baby it and preserve it. Like they're going to use it, and rightfully so. So decades down the line, finding pristine versions of early examples might be more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one aspect of rarity, and kind of plays into quality as well, because things that are of good quality can and do last over time, even if they do get used a little bit. I mean, look at really any kind of collectible. Like, I mentioned stamps earlier. I don't collect stamps, but I do know that some of the rarest stamps are rare because all the other ones got used up on envelopes and discarded, and now, a pristine unused stamp from that ancient era,
rare,
is now rare.
Baseball cards, for example, like they were things designed to be like traded and messed around with and played with, so they did, and they were little pieces of paper and cardboard, so they got crinkles and all that. So
yeah. Or even nowadays, like Pokemon cards, that's something that in my lifetime has gone from a commodity, sort of something you could pick up anywhere, to now hugely valuable collectibles that people pay inordinate sums of money at auctions for. So yeah, you never know. You never know.
You never know. So I mean, the Elementum is an example. Stuff like the QSP Penguin has a lot of variety in its lineup, but we think that's not like the prime focus of what we're going to look at today. It's just an example of something.
Yeah.
You mentioned folk or companies who do, right up front, they're producing limited runs.
Yes.
Some companies that come to mind will have like yearly limited runs or yearly editions. And obviously with time, those are probably going to become collectible as well. The Victorinox is famous for doing this. Every year there's a new Alox color that they've never done before and promise to never do again. We've got the Evoke and the Classic SD here with their current 2025 color. And this can actually make some people a little upset too.
Yeah, some collectors don't want to be catered to in that way. I think they want to curate their own collection and don't necessarily appreciate when companies kind of do that on their behalf. But I have to say, I really do appreciate when companies like Victorinox do something a little special for the people that are their super fans. And even if it's not exactly what one collector might have wanted, I think it's really fun that these editions come out every year and each one might be more to your taste or less to your taste, but it's fun to follow along.
Absolutely.
And you don't necessarily have to get all of them.
Yeah. Well, it also gets into the reason I think some people get a little upset by it is, these things are, if you take a cynical view to it, like these things are created to be collectible, which in some ways runs counter to what we were talking about before, like stuff that was common and now has become rare and is now collectible. So there's that, which I can recognize that feeling. One thing I will say, dealing with any factory company, is someone will say like, oh, this was so hot, why don't they make more? I wish they would just do this.
Right.
Any factory is going to have a finite amount of production capacity in a given year. And let's say, 90% of their capacity is taken up keeping the core models on the shelf.
Right.
And so you decide, what are you going to do with the extra 10%? You could bring one or two more core models that could be supported by that 10%. This is just not actual numbers here, but just for sake of argument. Or what if you do something fun with it? So rather than the consumer getting one or two new models that may not be to your liking over the course of a few years, you could have dozens of other models that get made for short little spurts. And hey, maybe they do make it to the regular lineup in another form at some point if they prove to be really popular. But I appreciate that a company is willing to do stuff that's different, stuff that keeps, honestly, these are the things that keep people excited, both collectors and the people actually making the knives too.
Yeah. I like to think about it that way too. I think it is a little cynical to consider, when companies make collectible items, that it's simply a cash grab or something. Like that's not. I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth, and that's not what I'm saying. But
I've heard people use that term, and like I get it, but also like these companies exist to make money, to support themselves and support the people that work for them. So they're in the business of making money. So
yeah, and we often forget the collectibles that weren't as successful. For every, I don't know, I don't know which of the annual handle colors, for example, from Victorinox are more popular than others, but I've got to think there's a clear winner out there. Maybe it's like the ice blue or whatever.
Right.
So for everyone that really hits and people really want and they sell out,
there's some that don't.
There's a bunch that don't, and that's not a cash grab.
This is a good example of that right here, actually. This so Boker does numerous 1 year and done editions. This one right here is part of their annual collector's editions, but as you can see, this has got 2020 on it. This was released 5 years ago, and we've still got a few of them on the shelves.
Cool knife.
It's a very cool knife. You know, it's pricey. It's a bit over $500. But you've got Chad Nichols Damascus in this case, curly birch, lock back on a more or less, I don't know, I guess I wouldn't call that a Barlow shape specifically, but it's cousins to a Barlow, I would say.
Yeah, it's got the Barlow silhouette, but not the Barlow bolster. I'd call it a boy's knife, but it's pretty big. It's a man's knife. That's what that is.
And these are serialized, so you know that can be an element to something that's worth collecting. But yeah, like these were only made in 2020. I don't know how many they did make. It might say on our detail page actually. This one is 999 pieces worldwide. So you know what you're getting into at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a very cool knife. Case is another one who does, you know, beyond just the yearly knives. Case knives are so collectible.
Yes, yes.
Just go into any blade show and find the case knife dealers and collectors who are not necessarily like the big dealers like KnifeCenter and all that, but like in the small tables where you've got people with cases of case knives. And they've been really leaning into lately their vault pattern stuff where we don't have any of 2025's yet because we haven't gotten any yet, but we have a few left of the Razor, which was 2024's pattern.
Cool blade shape.
Very cool blade shape.
Yeah.
They didn't limit these, if I'm correct, they don't limit these to any number of units specifically, but they will only be taking orders from dealers on these in the given year. And you know, releasing various ones throughout the year, and this is one of the Razors right here, which has, what's this, one of the jig bones. Let me look up the actual name here. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. But.
Yeah, case is an interesting case study, if you will.
I won't, but go ahead. But go ahead anyway.
Their vault, their history of knives made has been very meticulously kept, so they can go back and see, you know, when certain details were changed, when they switched from one shield to another, from one tang stamp to another, from this material to that material. And that's fun for people who are invested in the company and the, you know, history of traditional knives to kind of chart that. And they've just been making knives the same way for so long that, you know, it's given collectors a chance to really sink their teeth in and appreciate the little details that
and small
go into
changes year to year that make a new, you know, collectible item, so to speak, or a new entry into the collection.
Yeah.
And that's a good point with the history, and that's actually something I forgot to mention on when we were talking about the Elementum earlier. The Elementum, I think, deserves a place in modern knife icons for being like that knife that really was the poster child for changing the game of budget knife enthusiasm. So much so that like last year in 2024, they announced they'd sold their 1 millionth Elementum across all the family. So doesn't sound rare, but you know, that's a cool story behind that model at least.
Yeah.
The cool thing about case knives too is there's so many different ways you could choose to collect something. Because if you wanted to have like a complete like brand wide collection and you're just starting out, good grief.
Yeah, I don't even know if Case has a complete brand wide.
How would you even start to chew that apple, you know? But you know, this example right here, this is the Bone Stag inlays or covers, more appropriately called, because the inlay would be the shield here. You could collect all, you know, jigged Bone Stag style knives across all the different patterns.
Yeah.
Not just the Razor right here. And there are folks that do that for sure. There are some folks that only collect carbon steel case knives. I would say if you're gonna plan, like if you wanna focus on one specific pattern to collect, you know, a variety of case knives made in that pattern throughout the years, I would have said Peanut actually.
I do like the Peanut.
The Peanut's great, but I think the Mini Trapper, we have more Mini Trappers currently on the site than we do Peanuts. And I think they've been produced far longer than the Peanut has. Here's 3 right here. The nice thing about the Peanut, or the Mini Trapper, is it's a little bit bigger than the Peanut, so you really get to see the handle material a little more. I mean, I've long as I've been a huge fan of this yellow bone. We've got Curanite, we've got maple burl on this one with Damascus blades, which is also cool.
Different blade
that
shapes
one's
too.
even got, there's different blade variations. Normally you think of a trapper as having the long clip point blade and the long spay blade, but this one has, instead of the spay, it's got a long Warncliffe blade as well. So there's even blade shape variations within that. But yeah, I would say the Mini Trapper would be like the one pattern to collect if you wanted to focus in on one pattern. I think you're going to be able to find more of that than some others out there. If there's true case experts out there to let me know I'm wrong, please do in the comments. Because it's fun. But I love the yellow bone on that. They introduced that I think last year. There's some really cool ones.
I like the secondary Wharncliffe blade too. It's real easy to open, which I appreciate on the slip joint.
Yeah, and it's you see that Wharncliffe blade less on the mini trapper tthan some others.
Yeah, sounds collectible.
You could collect just Wharncliffe secondary blade mini trappers from case if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's an interesting, it's a different type of collecting in a way. My collection, for example, is all over the place. It kind of just represents more what I've accumulated than anything else.
As opposed to accumulated versus curated.
Well, I've curated it pretty tightly in that for every knife I've kept, I've probably sold 3. These are the knives that have stuck with me for one reason or another, but I don't have a specific set of criteria that I'm following. And with case though, it's almost more like coin collecting or something where you're trying to check every box and get every variance. Or just kind of fill out your little book of specific things you're looking for. And I think Case caters to that kind of collector in the way that they make knives too. The fact that they're always releasing new handle materials, they're permutating the different blade shapes and stuff. They are really offering every single type of variant for every single interested collector.
Agreed. So all of these knives have a certain amount of quality for sure. We talked about that as one of the elements you can look for and what makes a knife collectible. Let's jump to the real high-end stuff now, however. And we've got a few brands here to take a look at, and I think the key unifier between what we're going to show here is they're not, these are specific models you can focus in on that have been evolved and developed over years, iterated rather than discontinued and replaced with something new over the years. And that creates a history, which is the other part of one of the other parts of what we talked about, a history of the model, and as a byproduct, you're going to get variety as well. And the Sebenza is, an easy first thing to think of for sure.
Yeah. It's got a lot of history. It's the first frame lock, and it hasn't changed all that much since those first frame locks. Little interior changes, now they use the ceramic ball.
The shape has changed a little bit, but not dramatically. But it's those refinements and iterating over the years.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. I have a couple 21s and a couple 31s, and I appreciate them both, but probably appreciate more. I appreciate them more together. I appreciate having some of each, being able to see the evolution, feel the evolution. I find that rewarding as a collector. I didn't get rid of my Sebenza 21s as soon as the 31 came out.
Right.
I appreciated having that history and being able to follow along in that story, because they're both great knives.
They are great knives.
And that's what I'm after.
Yeah, for sure. And then you've got variety here. These are two 31s currently. This is a 31 small drop point with wood inlays. I forget what wood it is. I should have opened up all my tabs before we started filming, right, Thomas?
Yep.
Well, it's either bog oak or massacre.
Macassar.
Massacre.
Bog oak inlays. This was currently sold out, but a KnifeCenter exclusive with the different blade shape, the Insingo blade and micarta inlays. And that's a cool thing too. With with dealer exclusives, there's a lot of even beyond just the core catalog, other things become available to flesh out a collection for sure. And this is where I get to say I really appreciate the inlays on the 21, which we don't have here. I liked the dual inlays that the old soldiers have. But maybe I should start a Sebenza 21 collection with inlays.
Yeah.
These are things you could do. There's going to be plenty of variety for it. New pocket clip coming out from Chris Reeve. We saw it at SHOT Show. That shouldn't be big news, but it is.
Yeah. Well, when it's Chris Reeve, every little change becomes big news.
Next one we want to talk about Kind of in a similar vein to the Sebenza, American made, less history than the Sebenza, but you've still got, designer Bill Harsey, storied knife designer and maker behind this knife, the Spartan Harsey Folder. High-end, high-quality varieties produced usually for a specific year, although some limited editions do extend beyond. We've got the Royal Flush right here. This is the Cogworks. This is a God and Country one, I believe. So really cool embellished versions you could get your hands on here as well. And actually, this is the part where we do our knife salesman job and mention we've actually marked several of the S45 VN bladed versions of these down. We actually can't even tell you the price. You have to add it to cart to find out.
Yeah.
We're not allowed to advertise what price these are being sold at.
It's a great opportunity to get a collectible knife, a fantastic knife that happens to also be kind of collectible.
Yes, I would agree. But just really cool knives. They genuinely are. They feel great. Not quite the same level of utmost quality that the Chris Reeves are, but that's not to say it is not a quality knife. That's just the Sebenza is just like so high up there that it's hard for anyone to compete really.
Yeah, it's a different character than the Sebenza. I've called the Sebenzas like the ultimate high-end hard-use knife, and it splits the difference pretty equally between high-end and hard use. And the SHF leans a lot further into the hard use side of that. It's still very high-end, but it's much more robust feeling. It's got like a flat grind instead of any hollow, so it's just the geometry is a little tougher. There's more handle. One of our product guys upstairs, for example, he's got really, really big hands, and he doesn't even, he loves Sebenzas, but he doesn't even mess with the small one. But he loves the SHF.
Yeah.
Fits his hands perfectly. It's big enough for just about any big job. And like the bonus is, you get to have something unique. Like they're not making these engraved versions more than the 1 or 2 runs that they did. They're not coming back, so...
I think the one exception might have been like the Plague Doctor one. That one was
really that one
popular.
They kept rolling.
They rolled it, but yeah, most of these aren't going to be around forever type of thing.
Yeah.
And it's American-made manufacturer. It's not super high quantities. That gets back to the rarity of the Sebenza too. Like, there's a ton of Sebenzas out there on the world at this point for sure, but they're still a small volume manufacturer.
Yeah.
They're not making things that are pumped out by the thousands. Well, they make more than 1,000 knives in a year, but you know what I mean, like the tens and hundreds
at a time, no.
At a time,
yeah.
Well, speaking of our friend upstairs who loves the SHF, the next knife is one of his. A recent entry on the list, the Demko AD20 series. It doesn't have the same amount of history as some of these models, but you've got a longtime designer in Andrew Demko, and you've got them iterating on a platform and doing real cool things with a real high-end and fairly low-volume product too. When you're talking about the U.S.-made AD20 right here.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a fun story too to follow along with it. Talking about Demko, because these USA-made AD20s. This one here is a customized version here with the cool carving and anodization. And
I believe this one was hand ground by Andrew Demko as well.
I think so. So yeah, so this is
a special one. Like there's not another one out there like this. And you can get, production run versions of the AD20, but you can find these custom and customized versions of it as well. Oftentimes at blade shows, sometimes we are able to offer some on our website as well. And talk about collecting things. If you can have a knife model where you might have like 3 or 4 or 5 of them after a couple years, and each one is one of a kind, that's just really cool.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And Demko's making more knives now, but especially when he made this particular one, he was just starting his own shop, kicking off his own brand. So being able to collect Demko knives is, being able to support a new brand from the ground up. And I think that's a fun kind of part of this too. When you come to really connect with a certain maker and how they do things, the way their knives feel and operate, it's genuinely it feels really good to like
It's satisfying.
to follow them along and watch them grow and appreciate their journey.
And you're kind of a part of that journey at the same time.
Yeah,
By participating in it, by participating in the commerce of the situation, you are contributing in a small bit to that story.
Yeah, and people get very excited about it. I mean, I think that's why these knives are still, reselling for more than table price. Like if you buy a Demko custom at a show, you can turn around and sell that for a lot of money. And for some people, that's a big part of collecting too. Either the idea that you keep that is so precious to you that you kind of, want to have all that specialness for yourself, or, for someone buying it, that they're willing to pay that premium just to be able to handle a piece of work from this maker. It's an interesting intersection of where rarity and demand and collecting all kind of intersect.
Sure, definitely. I've just got one of the production versions right here, which is still cool, but it's not as cool as this.
And pretty collectible. Those titanium scaled ones.
And with 3V steel, those sold out. That was a KnifeCenter exclusive there for a little bit.
Not available anymore. You could customize a knife to look like this, but this was straight from the OEM Demko.
Other ones worth mentioning kind of in this vein, I would say, would be like Hinderer knives. Is along the same thing. They've iterated designs over the years and produced a lot of variety within it. Shirogorov, we've got a Ursus, Quantum Ursus over here. That would be a good one to do like a brand-wide collection, because they do variety within the models, but well, they're expensive enough. You could definitely sink all your money and not have all the, the variants going on.
Yeah.
Those are very cool.
The rarity is a big part of that too. I mean, like with Demko and Shiro especially, not being able to just like read about a knife and then go and get it.
Yeah.
You really do have to hunt for it, and that's where those prices come in. You got to find somebody who's setting a price high enough to keep the casuals at bay, so to speak, just for the hardcore collectors. There's a lot of like angry words uttered about really high dollar knives, especially when originally they might have sold for less. But that's collecting. That's not just knives. That's collecting.
Yeah.
Sometimes things blow up. I mean, we've had KnifeCenter exclusives that we sold, at the regular price we sell knives at, and 2-3 years later they're on eBay for 3 times as much. And
our burlap shaman with S90V blades is a good example. Those sold out in a day and we're selling for a lot more than what people paid for them. Might still be, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's not a case where we were looking to, rip people off like in the secondary market. We just wanted to. Well,
we don't get any of those dollars. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
The funny thing with that one is, that combination of burlap micarta and S90V, I fought against.
Yeah.
I was like, it needs like a tougher steel than S90. I want like a crew wear or something on that. And I was overruled, and hey, they all sold, so what can I say?
It's a good combo. I get where you're coming from, but S90V is hard to beat.
S90V is a good steel, for sure. It holds an edge really well. Well, that's a good segue into the next, wrapping things up here.
Yeah.
The one thing I do want to say is, these were a lot of high dollar things. You can collect knives without spending high dollar amounts on things.
Absolutely.
This is just an opportunity to look at some of that really cool stuff that's out there. But Spyderco is a good brand to look at for folks who like to collect a brand, not just a single knife, although there's variety enough in some of the Spyderco models where you could collect a single pattern, like paramilitary 2 buyers, for example. But if you want to collect one brand that produces enough variety, not in just the designs, but in the special editions they do, would be Spyderco, I would say.
Yeah. Got a couple of sprint runs right here.
A couple of sprint runs we still have in stock, and these are ones that that still, to your point, some are instant sellouts, some take a little bit longer. These two have taken a little bit longer, but they're only produced in limited quantities. The quantity of each may vary from one sprint run to the other, but we've got a Delica with, PD1? Yep, PD1 steel here, an S90V military 2 over here. They're producing things to be collectible in a way, but they're also utilizing the quote unquote leftover manufacturing capacity they have to do fun stuff and do more than just some more basic stuff at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. And with Spyderco especially, I think they have to make regular production models that are a good fit for everybody. That's why every model kind of is introduced with black G10 and S30V steel.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good combination of materials that appeals to a broad swath of people and works for just about everybody. But Spyderco, being huge fans of high-end steels and exotic materials themselves, they understand that those aren't necessarily going to be for everybody. But things like this is like I think the Spyderco forumites call this like the Sal spec, because he in particular is a huge fan of S90V and peel ply carbon fiber.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is his version of the knife that he would want.
It's like his signature guitar. It's
yeah. That's exactly it. So, this version's more expensive than the regular version, which means it's not a good fit for everybody, but it's, his kind of like ultimate expression of the knife. So,
well, what I love as well is like you're speaking about, these, the Spyderco buyer that won't buy the base model when you are in fact that person.
Yeah.
Like,
definitely.
Like we know, in most cases, Spyderco is going to be thinking about a special edition or a sprint run. Granted, if they introduce a knife and it sells horribly, they're not going to likely produce a sprint run as well. Mm-hmm. But Seth is going to be the guy who waits for the special edition.
Yeah, and why not, right? I've got enough knives to hold me over till the special edition comes out. And it's fun to look back and see the ones I've accumulated that aren't available anymore. Like the Sage is a good example of this. A lot of those old Sages you just can't really find anymore. So it's nice to have them and see why they're special and appreciate that for yourself. And it's sad to say, but part of what makes them special is the fact that they get discontinued.
Right.
If they were around all the time, they wouldn't be as collectible.
They wouldn't be as special, sure.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to a good final point. It's almost like you planned the segue here. Discontinued stuff, when, by its very nature, it starts the clock on rarity in a way.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I'd say if, Mr. Sorry, let me get your name again. Sorry, Michael Bloomston. You mentioned you're not asking this question to look into like speculating on the value of knives, which is good because again, like, don't get too hung up on is this knife going to appreciate in value? Is it going to be this or that?
Yeah.
Do you like it? Like, does it make you happy? Good. Full stop. If you were trying to speculate, however, one area you can look would be discontinued knives. When something gets announced that it's discontinued, take a look through the list of what's still available before they're sold out. And it's a little bit of speculation, but sometimes you can say, hey, I bet you 5 years from now, people are going to look back and appreciate what they didn't appreciate now.
Yeah.
The Benchmade Anthem is a great example of that.
Yeah.
That was a knife, people, like, we hear them now saying, like, I can't, why did they, wish they would bring that back? Why did they discontinue it? Well, they discontinued it because you weren't buying it.
Yeah, at the time, it was not the hit that Benchmade, needed it to be.
Yeah.
And they made it for a while. But
they couldn't sell enough to keep making it. And they had to turn their production capacity over into something that was going to make them money. But if you can catch those hits sometimes, and like I said, it's speculation, but there could be some fun things down the road where you can be like, I have 10 Benchmade Anthems I'm sitting on. How much can I get for them today? That sort of thing.
Yeah, it helps that when things go on discontinued, they often go on sale too.
True. But yeah, that.
One point well, I would like to bring this up too, because it's not just the big brands announce when stuff is discontinued because they know that people may be waiting to pick something up or just kind of to announce that this is the last chance. But for all the knives, this table's not a great example because these collectible knives have been around a while, but if you look on our site, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of SKUs. And Most of those SKUs, most of them, will be discontinued within 5 years. They will have rolled over into new things, and with no fanfare. You know, for every Buck 110, Benchmade 940, Paramilitary 2 that lasts and stays in production for decades, there are dozens of knives that manufacturers took a chance on, you know, hopefully made some profit on, you know, recouped the cost of the tooling, but just didn't make sense to run long term.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of these things get made in batches too. Like, you know, any company that with a lineup, even Buck is not making, well, they might be making Buck 110s every day, but, you know, they're going to allocate, okay, this is where we're going to work on Buck 110s up to a certain amount of units. Then we're going to make 112s, and we're going to make Vantages, we're going to make whatever. And that happens on, you know, on smaller scale too. Like a lot of the companies like Civivi, they'll come up with a knife, they'll do their batch to support the launch of it, and if they see it selling quickly enough, they're going to schedule another batch. But if it's not, they made it one time.
Yeah.
And yeah, when they're gone, they're gone. And those things aren't always like broadcast, you know, super highly.
We talk about production knives, and usually that implies that they'll be in production, that they're going to be around. But the reality is that they aren't necessarily. You know, they're made in batches in a production capacity.
Schedule or capacity,
yeah. But they're not necessarily always going to be there. So, you know, to your point about just following, buying what works for you and what you enjoy, you know, just follow that. And I think your collection will grow naturally.
Yeah, like trying to speculate on what's, you know, gonna be, that just gets too stressful. That seems, and it's not why I like knives. I don't like knives to make money. I like knives because I like knives.
Yes.
So anyway, that's our parting thoughts for today, I guess. But anyway, if you are interested in any of these items, we're gonna leave links in the description, which will take you over to the purchase pages for these wherever we can. You know, non-available exclusives notwithstanding, of course. But check out the links in the description. Those will take you to KnifeCenter.com. Where some of these more expensive ones, if you want to break up payments into more manageable chunks, we recently added Sezzle as a payment option. And don't forget about our long-running Knife Rewards program either, so you can earn some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson.
I'm Seth V.
That's all for now. We're signing off. See you next time.